Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a minute or two. And actually, while we're joining, what I'd love to do is open up a poll for folks to jump on in. Pretty simple stuff. Just use your camera on your phone to take a look at the QR code, or if you've got a QR scanner on your phone. Most phones nowadays have a QR scanner through their camera. If you click on that, or if you take a picture of it, you should automatically be taken to your browser and ask this poll. And if you'd like to start filling that out, we can see who's joining us and what that means in terms of your number one inhibitor. Many of you that I'm seeing on our RSVP list are founders, so I'd love to hear from you. And take a look at the poll, and let's hear what people have to say.
Heather, would you like the panelists to also answer?
Sure. And if you don't have the QR code reader, you can also go to slido.com, and that is the poll number. So if you put in the poll number, you should be able to get this question and answer it that way as well. So if you don't have a QR code reader, no worries. So for those of you that's just joining, we got a bunch in the last minute or two. Welcome. This is our panel discussion for the TiE Women Program, demonstrating confidence in the pitch room. We'll get started in a few minutes. If you see the poll on screen, you can use your QR code reader, and it will take you to the browser webpage where this question is being asked, and you can just answer right on the screen. Or you can go to slido.com and find this poll, which is A098, and answer the poll there. We'll give it one more minute. Some interesting stuff. Looks like lack of funding is winning so far. Not close behind is getting the mentorship I need. So this is good feedback.
None of these are winning.
Right. No, none of these are winning. Not at 17 folks, that's for sure. But good feedback.
I meant more from the perspective of all of this sucks.
Oh yeah, all of this sucks. You're right.
All the options are not good.
Yes, that's right. No. All right, well, we're going to get started. This is pretty good information here. We've been getting a lot over the last few months, and not surprisingly, lack of funding continues to come up. We're going to talk about that a little bit here in a few minutes. Getting the mentorship, we'll also talk about that in a few. Lack of support system, this is higher than usual, so interesting. So that might be a future topic for one of our panel discussions. lack of knowledge around funding options, and then particular business skill and having your demonstrating confidence. So usually demonstrating confidence or feeling confidence when presenting an idea or plan or my pitch is usually comes up pretty high. So I'm pretty surprised that it's the lower of the numbers, but interesting nonetheless. Thank you for filling out. All right. Let me first start by thanking our sponsors. We've got a lot of great folks that support TiE, Elevate Capital being one, but Tonkin Torp and KBF, Certified Public Accountants, both great support systems and services for what are sort of baseline costs of doing business, legal and accounting for startups. Fantastic support in our community. Central office, I think most of you know, they do a great job in offering TiE office space and our startups space, temporary space. And then the Oregon Community Foundation, where they are a big steward of major donations and funds throughout the Oregon community of philanthropy. So thank you so much to supporting us and our efforts in building a great entrepreneurial community in Oregon. So TiE Women. Many of you have probably seen TiE Women. This is a new program here in Oregon, but we've started kicking off some events over the last 6 months. I'd like to just talk a little bit about what TiE Women is about. So if you're interested in joining TiE as a charter member or as an entrepreneur, our focus within the TiE Women program is really to embrace, engage, and empower women entrepreneurs across the globe, irrespective of size, origin, standing, or background. And we do this through a few ways. The first is really through our charter members. We have great mentorship globally. We've got programming and training that many of our mentors, even folks on the phone, participate in, this being one of them, in supporting our entrepreneurs in just skill sets and confidence and supporting them in building a more stronger idea or more stronger business that has more likelihood of getting funding. We have global TiE Angels, so a much larger access to funding for our entrepreneurs within the TiE program. And by doing this just increases the pipeline and the strength of that pipeline that helps bring in more strong charter members and more TiE Angels, which just reinforces that value for our TiE entrepreneurs. And so we're really focused on building on these synergies to help support our women entrepreneurs. So what do we do to help our women entrepreneurs? What are some of the things that we need to focus on? And so I sort of went out and tried to do some research on what's going on among the women entrepreneur community and what data is out there to help us understand what problems do we need to solve, right? There's a lot going on. And before we decide what kind of programming, training, and talks like this, we want to understand what's going on. And so first, ta-da, 50% of the US adults are women. That's
Surprise!
New, right? Total surprise. Then it gets a little more serious. We've got 30% of US businesses are women-owned, smaller than the number of us. And then only 25% of us are looking for financing, right? What's going on there? That really results in only 10% of businesses are women looking for funding. Pretty small percentage. And oh, by the way, we ask for significantly less dollars in financing. So we ask for less, we don't seek financing much, and only 2% of VC funding goes to women entrepreneurs. I see I talk to a lot of women that think it's really just the VCs don't fund women entrepreneurs. This data kind of shows you that's not really true, right? We don't really seek financing as much. We ask for significantly less. So there's different things going on here that we're trying to understand, right? And so we did some additional research. What's going on? What is driving What is inhibiting the women entrepreneur ecosystem or women entrepreneurs in terms of being successful? The first thing we hear is confidence. So, you know, I don't know if you've heard about this report that HP put out, I don't know, a few years ago, that talks about how men will apply for jobs when they have 60% of the qualifications that the job is prescribing or that the job is requiring. Women wait until they have 100% of the qualifications and the experience that that job is requiring. That's just one data point that talks about the level of confidence and the credit we give ourselves in taking chances. And that's one big area that we believe is driving these differences in numbers out in the entrepreneurial space. Another is perception, perceived confidence and perceived aggressiveness. And I'll quote one study, and I think one of our panelists is going to be talking a little bit more about this. And this is some observational research that was done at TechCrunch Disrupt. It's a funding competition for a startup funding competition in New York. And they observed some Q&A sessions between VCs, very prominent VCs, and entrepreneurs. About 140, I think, VCs and about 190 or so entrepreneurs. And they observed the questions that were being asked. 67% of the questions asked of male entrepreneurs were more promotion oriented. So achievements, dreams, advancement, and sort of ideas, ideals. And 66% of the female entrepreneurs were asked questions that were prevention oriented, talking about risk. How are you going to mitigate this risk? What are your risk mitigation plans? What risks do you see? How do you, you know, around security and vigilance around the business? So that ended in significantly different funding amounts. So 7 times less funding was given to the female entrepreneurs versus the men entrepreneurs that were related to these level of questionings, the types of questions that were being asked women versus men. So very interesting perspective on the perception of women entrepreneurs versus men entrepreneurs. Now, we're not going to be able to control the perception today, right? We're not here to address the perception. We're here to talk about the actions we can take that can combat or change the way people perceive us, right? We're not sitting back and saying, oh, well, that's a perception, I'm not going to change it. You may not be able to change it, but you'll be able to change the way you operate and be able to address those issues. We're going to talk about that today. The third is support systems. So we saw that poll earlier today, earlier in the session, where support system, right? I just don't have the mentors I need, or I don't have the family support that I need in order to manage or run a business and be successful in my entrepreneurial efforts. And then another is just access to funding. Some of this is knowledge, not an understanding of all of the options you have in funding, but then also sort of this perceived or belief that the funding for women entrepreneurs is significantly less, or they have less of a chance to get funding out there. So these are the top sort of issues that we're tackling with TiE Women, right? How do we tackle these? What are the things that we can actually tackle ourselves through support of our entrepreneur community and through TiE mentors and the like? And that's what we're going to focus on today. It's really confidence and the perception or perceived confidence in the pitch room. That's what we're focused on today. So with that, I'd love to have each of our Rockstar panel members introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about them. All of them are tied to TiE. They're huge advocates and members of our TiE community that we respect and value in our community. So why don't we start with Diane? Do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself?
I'd be happy to. Hello, everybody. Good to be here. Glad you could join us. We decided we should have done this over cocktails, but maybe the next time. I'm a managing director with Voyager Capital, and Voyager is a early stage B2B institutional venture capital firm. So what that basically means is that we invest in software companies that are focused on selling any kind of solution to an enterprise. While we may be biased in favor of or against certain vertical industries or certain technologies, we pretty much look at everything. I represent our interests here in Oregon, although I do sit on 2 boards up in Portland, up in Seattle as well. So I'm on 6 boards, but I'll look at somewhere about 150 to 200 pitches a year. Prior to joining Voyager, where I've been for the last almost 14 years, I spent over 25 years on the operational side of the tech industry in sales, marketing, business development in both very large multinational companies as well as venture-backed companies, and did that around the world. Came back to Portland, which is a city that I love, in a region that is extremely interesting to be an investor in, and that has some fantastic talent. So I'm thrilled to be here today.
Thanks, Diane. Darty?
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for having me on this wonderful panel, all rock star women. I am an accidental entrepreneur. I have 2 businesses in India, and I have 1 business here for the last 20 plus years. Pretty much, as the word would suggest, fell on accidentally, which clearly means I've made a lot more mistakes than the average entrepreneur. Started when bootstrapping wasn't popular, or we didn't have VC-backed funding or angel investors to fall back on. So a lot of family money went in, and a lot of mistakes made. But along the way, I discovered a few nuances for myself in the business world, in the entrepreneurial world, and attached myself to investing in people, whether it was for my team that I was building in India or here, or also along the way, helping other women, attain, I guess, their needs or challenges that they had, addressing those in whatever way that I could, and really found a passion for that, and came in contact with TiE New York 3 years ago when I was advising a startup in New York, and I loved what I saw and became deeply engaged, first as a charter member, then took ownership of a couple of programs for New York, joined the board 2 years ago, and I'm the current president for TiE New York. We have a fantastic board here, and I love the community overall, the global community. In doing a road show a couple of years ago for TiE, I went to B towns in India to mentor women entrepreneurs in 2 states in very rural parts of India. Even though I grew up in India, I had never been to these areas. And so I discovered a lot about, I think what we're going to be discussing about today, of course, but, needs and, different challenges that different metros face and different women entrepreneurs face, doesn't matter where they come from. And I saw also a lot of strength coming from smaller areas. And so kept that, as a value add for me. Learned a lot of fantastic lessons for myself. Learned about humility, and really understanding and listening more attentively to my team. It helped me a lot as an entrepreneur. And last year when we were at a TiE retreat, this whole discussion came up, and we wanted to put together a program that would address the global women entrepreneur and be able to foster similarly, because there was clearly a need across all the chapters. The idea was to create a bridge, if you will, just to connect chapters, and of course successful chapters like Oregon that do a lot for TiE women, and a few other chapters in India and globally as well. And so I became the vice chair for TiE Women, and it's been a very interesting journey so far. We're looking forward to a great program culmination in Dubai in December 2020. Fingers crossed with everything that's going on that we're still able to pull it off. But I'm very happy to be here and happy to add any value I can as an entrepreneur, investor, or as part of TiE Women or TiE Global. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Darty. Robin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Robin Jones. I am one of the board members and charter members for TiE Oregon, and I'm currently the CEO of Monsoon Incorporated, which has been a kind of a Portland institution now since about 2002, but I'm a more recent addition to the team. I've been in the CEO role for just over a year. But I have been either one of the founding members of a startup or a leadership member of the leadership team for 7 startup companies at this point in my career. So I guess you could say I'm a glutton for punishment. But and some of those did quite well, and some of them flopped. And I have lots of scars on my back to share with everyone. But I think I have a very soft spot in my heart for TiE. TiE, when I first moved to Oregon, TiE was a really great support for me. And in fact, the company that I was the chief operating officer of, Geoloki, was one of the very earliest TiE Angels investments. And we took money from Diane, which Diane love hates me because of.
We made money. We made money. It was
yeah, well, I know, but you almost didn't. So I have been, as I mentioned, I've been a charter member, and I've been on the board now for, I believe, 4 years. Isn't that right, Carrie? I think I'm in my second full term at this point. But I do a lot of mentoring of various TiE members and entrepreneurs around town, just because I received a lot of the benefit of that mentoring before. And I think it's really important to pay it forward, particularly for other women that are in this crazy ass industry that we've decided to join in entrepreneurship. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Robin. Okay, Pam.
So I'm Pam Horan, and I've spent the majority of my career in the internet media and advertising space. I have been on the leadership team for 3 startups, as well as worked on the corporate side. And most recently, I ran a trade association of online media companies, which is the digital arms of all the big media companies like the New York Times and ESPN and CBS. And today, my husband and I moved to Portland about 5 years ago. And today we have a consulting business where we work with both startups as well as established media companies looking at ways to build diversified revenue streams. We do direct investing with startups as well as through a variety of funds that we're involved with here in Oregon, including the Oregon Venture Fund, the Portland Seed Fund, and the Cascade Seed Fund. And we work with different startups, helping them think about their business model as well as building out business plans to help raise funds. This is my first formal panel that I've gotten involved with TiE. I have been able to view some of the previous ones, but got exposed to TiE when we moved to Portland and think it's a great organization and look forward to getting more involved.
Thanks, Pam. All right, ladies, we're going to open this up to some questions, or I'm going to be asking some questions. We'll open it up to the audience in a little bit for asking your questions. But I thought we'd seed the panel first and chat a little bit about this concept of confidence in the pitch room. So what I'd like to do is ask the first question. And maybe I'll start with you, Diane. What do you believe the bigger problem is? Perceived lack of confidence or actual lack of confidence in the pitch room, assuming that the latter doesn't necessarily have to lead to the former?
Thanks for starting with me. You know, some of you have heard me say this before, but I'll start out with this right now. Male, female, it doesn't matter. Everybody's faking it. There is, you know, anyone listening to this that believes that anyone you watch has their shit together at all times, just, you know, you just got it wrong, right? So the thing that you got to go into the room realizing is that you are good. You know, if you've got the guts to walk into a room asking somebody for money, then you're 75% of the way there in terms of your confidence level, whether you know it or not. So the issue isn't real or perceived. The issue is what's inside of you. The issue is your ability to walk in the room and, put the smile on your face and have you got to have your facts. I mean, you don't deserve to be in the room asking for money if you don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, you got to put the work into it, and you gotta know what you're talking about. But that doesn't mean you have all the answers. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I need to come back to you on that. But you got to know why you're there. And so I guess the easy answer is it's perceived, but the perception isn't by those looking at you, it's by what's inside your own brain, I think. And so you got to start out by, just realizing you are good. If you have the guts to go ask for money, you are good just by nature of the fact that you've walked into that.
Thank you. Robin.
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with what Diane has to say, but I think there's something additional there. And that is that even when you are confident, even when you do know your facts, sometimes it's really hard to project the level of hubris that a man can project in the room. That's really, like, to me, that is what leads to the perception issue. It's not so much that setting sort of implicit bias aside, because yes, it exists. But I also think that there is a bigger issue that has to do with how women present themselves, and not presenting themselves with that level of kind of hubris. And like, if it's that you need to do the Wonder Woman stance before you walk into the room, do it. If it's that you need to like review all your numbers frantically to make sure that you still have them memorized, do it. But what you need to do is walk in and own the room. And like Diane said, if you can walk in and own the room and you don't know the answer to something, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to it. If you walk into the room and you look like you're a timid mouse and you're acting like a timid mouse, and then they ask a hard question and you say, gosh, I don't know the answer to it, you're dead in the water. It will not happen. So anything that you can do to project confidence, even if you don't feel it, is I think the paramount thing here, because I think most investors don't want to be biased, but women just have less hubris overall. I mean, it comes back to what Heather was saying about guys apply to jobs that they're clearly not qualified for all the time, and women don't. There is an inherent lack of willingness to put yourself out there in women that most women, I think, that most women experience at some point in their lives. If you can work on that skill of figuring out how to put that in its box for the hour that you're sitting in front of Diane or whomever the investor is, figure that out. That will take you miles.
Great, thank you. Darty, how do women trip themselves up? Name the top 1 or 2 things you've seen women do to sabotage themselves, either in the pitch room or just, in career.
I echo everything Diane and Robin have said. And for me, it's a little bit more than just the pitch room. For me, it's definitely the before that we've talked about, coming in confidence and coming in prepared and being able to answer all the questions that come and being able to, say that I don't know the answer. But for me, the after is also very important. Coming back with that answer, keeping in touch and saying, that was the answer that you needed, and here you go, I researched it, and this is what I found. To me, that adds a whole different level of confidence that a woman is portraying after the fact, because you remembered, you researched, and you came back. And I think that's something, and a lot of times I find people change their answers also, and they forget that investors do remember. If I've seen a pitch once and I'm seeing it again for a different reason, it could be that I'm in a group of investors now. I want somebody else to look at it. I think a lot of times we tend to forget that, we do remember. And so, sticking with the script, I guess, is equally important. Mm-hmm. And if there is a reason that, something changed, maybe the co-founder had to be let go, there are so many reasons that you could have. It's very good to be honest and open about it and not wait for the investor to ask, and just proactively share that information.
Thank you. Pam, how do you think women trip themselves up? What are the top 2 things you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's, as we've talked about, it's a stylistic thing. I think that women tend to be more conservative, as you started out, in terms of just what they're asking for in terms of the amount of money. But often I think that even though they're pretty darn good at the, networking stage and the pitching stage, when it comes to that, final stage of really closing it, it's how are they, or are they not delivering on that, what is that big idea? In terms of really selling it, maybe focusing a little bit more on the metrics. And I think that in doing that, sometimes they're communicating that they can build a nice small business, but aren't doing what an investor really wants, which is demonstrating the fact that they can build a really big business and that they're going to be able to deliver those returns at whatever cost. So I think it's really looking at, what does it take to instill that confidence that you are going to be able to do that. I think that a good example of that is, for those of you that know Emma, who's the founder of Wildfang, when she originally came in to pitch OVF, Oregon Venture Fund, initially I thought that the idea was a small idea. And within minutes of her presentation, not only did I see the opportunity was large, but also that Emma really wanted to change the world. She really wanted to start a revolution. And that's what everyone bought into. Her enthusiasm, her commitment, she had all the metrics, she had all the business, basics, but it was really that what she brought to the table in terms of that. So I think that it's being able to make sure that you are communicating the fact that this is a big vision idea, and that you are going to do everything within your powers to make it happen. And it's hubris, as Robin mentioned. As Diane said, it's coming into the room, and that's 75% of it. But I think getting over that end line is being able to really focus on, presenting that big picture vision, which I think inherently guys find it, just to be, talking about generalities, find it easier to do.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Heather, if you don't mind, I have one other thing that I'd like to add to that question. So I read something at the end of last week that actually I now went and researched it, and it's been around circulating the internet since like 2010, but I'm apparently a late bloomer. But it just kind of blew my mind. And it was one of these things that is so obvious when you think about it, but I'd never thought about it before. And it was this concept that certain people grow up in families where they learn to ask for what they want and then expect that they expect that sometimes they're going to get enough. And other people grow up in families where they sort of tiptoe around the issues and kind of, don't ask until they're pretty certain that they're going to get what they want. And while that particular example in the article that was written about it had nothing to do with gender, it just, to me, I went, whoa, this really feels like this is sort of a male-female divide, by and large, when you're talking about working with investors. And what Pam said, I think it was when you were talking about Emma, about just being a closer, right? Like, that is asking. You have to ask, and you have to be willing to actually receive a no in order to actually get something across the finish line. And I thought that was just a really, really fascinating thing. If anybody wants to look it up, I believe it was an Atlantic article that if you just Google like askers versus guessers, it'll pop right up for you. But at least for me, that was just this like major aha moment, because naturally I'm totally a guesser, but I have converted myself into an asker over the course of my career, not knowing that I was doing it, but it has paid off in spades.
Thank you. Dan, what would you add to this? How do women trip themselves up?
So, yeah, I'm sitting here listening to us all speak about it. I mean, I think there's a few fundamentals here. Firstly, just, not all businesses, by the way, are venture backable. So we've got to sort of understand that this isn't just about, VCs and asking for money from VCs. So there's a broad conversation about, where do you find money? And different access points require different kinds of approaches. Not everybody goes in and does a pitch in front of a group of people. That's my world, but it's not for every single women-owned business. But I think I think what you got to understand, if you are in the world of where you are going to walk in the room and ask for money, and that the majority of the people in the room are men, you got to understand at this point, men are extremely motivated right now to invest in women. There is, and we can talk about whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent. Whether, you know, when I joined the workforce, I'm really old, in the late 70s. There were quotas. I mean, I was a female engineer. I got hired by Digital Equipment Corporation because I was a female engineer, and they expected at that time that you needed to be an engineer in order to sell computers, which in today's world sounds nuts. But you had to count power and backplanes and shit like this. I mean, it was crazy. So I filled a quota. Now, I've had women as recent as this week sit and say, well, that's just not right. I should be treated equal. There should be no bias. The reality is, whatever allows you to get in the door, because believe me, the guys are using this, whatever allows you in the door, you take it. And so the guys are motivated right now to invest in women. And if that's an opportunity for you to get in the door, then don't sit and say, oh, there's something wrong with that. It doesn't matter. If it gets you in the room, you get the meeting in the room, number one. Number two, somehow you got to take gender off the table by still being a woman, right? Boys and girls are different. We have phenomenal assets that the guys don't have, right? But when you're in there doing the pitch and listening to all the other gals here talk about some of the aspects to doing that, you got to have your facts. You got to have your metrics. You got to know what's going on. You got to take gender off the table as it relates to being the CEO of your company, right? But at the same time, you got to be yourself. We don't have to be like the guy. We don't have to act like the guy. We don't have to behave like the guy. We can be us. In fact, being us is a benefit. But in the ownership of your business, in the discussion of why you want money, you got to take gender off the table. They got to see you as the CEO, not as the woman CEO coming in the door. The fact that you're a woman may get you in the door, though, today. And that's an opportunity that you should not overlook at all.
That's great. Thanks, Diane. Let's move on to the next question. How about Darty? Do you have one aha moment that was a turning point in your career as it relates to your ability to demonstrate or feel confidence? And what can other people learn from that?
Heather, I have a lot of aha moments.
Good.
they keep coming to me on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So there are, obviously there are too many to kind of pin down, but I've I think conditioned myself to say any room that I enter, whether it's team building or investing or talking to a mentee, I do walk in with some kind of clarity for me, for the purpose. Why am I there? I think that's very important for me. And I also tell myself, and I do this almost daily, that I'm the best person in the right place at the right time to get this job done. And that really, it has helped me through the toughest, situations. And, like everybody's been saying, it's really using whatever card that is, available and getting your foot in the door. And then it's really the work that's going to speak for itself, right? So yeah, I do have continuous aha moments. I'm having a few right now talking to all of you.
Robin, how about you? Do you have an aha moment?
Yeah, so my aha moment, or one of my aha moments, because I think you're right, they continue to happen to you if you're paying attention. But one of the very earliest ones happened when I was probably, 24 years old or so. And I was working for Motorola back when Motorola was a giant corporation, and I had been put in charge of a $3.5 million project and a team of 15 engineers that all had either masters or PhDs in computer science or electrical engineering. And here I am with my bachelor's in biology as their project manager and basically their boss, their influential boss, not their actual direct line supervisor. And every day we'd have a company or we'd have a team stand up they didn't call them stand-ups then, but we'd have a team meeting. We would talk through kind of how the project was coming along. And what I got from the team was a lot of, well, it's not going to work because there's this obstacle in the way, or this isn't feasible, or it's going to take a lot longer than we planned, or da, 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 da. Like it was a constant, almost like self-sabotaging that the team was doing. And frankly, what happened was not because I was like in control of the situation. I just got pissed off. I got furious at the all men, because it was all men in the team. And I just got furious at him. And I said, God damn it. I remember slamming my hands down on the table and standing up and just, I mean, it was like a scene out of a movie, but I was like, God damn it, you're engineers. That means your job is to build stuff and solve problems. And why the hell are you not solving problems? And I just had a temper tantrum. And I said, that's it though. You walk into this room and you offer up a problem and you also offer up a solution, or I'm gonna push you off the team. I just lost it. And my God, you guys, they turned it around like that. I never had that happen in that room again. We were the only project that that division of Motorola ever delivered on time and within budget. And what the aha moment coming out of it was that if I was going to be a leader, I needed to act like a leader. I needed to set the tone for the team. I needed to act with confidence. I needed to tell people when things were uncertain what needed to get done and what the next steps were. And it has done wonders for me. And yeah, sometimes people say, oh, I don't like your tone, or oh, you're bossy. I don't give a shit. Am I getting results? Yes, I am getting results. You don't like me? I don't care. I'm not being paid to be likable. I'm being paid to get the job done. So I think maybe losing your temper might not be the worst thing in the world.
Well, and I also heard, you know, don't be afraid to lead. You sort of sat back and said, what would a leader do here? They're going to change.
Well, I didn't sit back.
You know,
after the fact, I did.
Well,
I did not in the moment.
Yeah, right.
I just lost my shit.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's talk about an aha moment, Pam.
I guess my earliest memory of an aha moment came when I was a marketing manager at a software company, and I had a male counterpart who was heading up product management, and we worked very closely together. Kind of our successes were tied to one another, and over that previous 12 months, the two of us had taken on more and more responsibility because we had product line extensions that were created. And his annual review came up several months before mine, and he was promoted. And so when it was time for my review, I came to my boss and I presented my accomplishments and my contributions to kind of the overall business metrics, and said that I believed that I was due for a promotion. And she agreed, and she said, I'm going to take it to the general manager of the division, and she did. And at the time, the way that the structure worked in the organization was the GM also had to take it to his executive vice president for approval. Long story short, the GM came back and said the EVP had not approved it. Now, just for some background, the EVP was a man who came from a very male-dominant and chauvinistic culture, and this was in the 80s. He basically had said no. So I asked my boss whether I could go talk to the GM directly, which I did. I again stated my case, showed the results, and he ultimately agreed. And he went and championed for me. And ultimately, in the end, I got the promotion. And my boss, who, as I mentioned, was a woman, said to me that most people, whether it was a male or a female, would have given up a lot earlier than I had in the process. And that ultimately, the EVP had told her that my fighting had earned some additional respect. In the end, it taught me that, in my career, I was going to have to be willing to stand up and to sell my case hard. And, the combination of metrics and my accomplishments, as well as my chutzpah, so to speak, I think ultimately helped me understand how I was going to have to begin to navigate my career, and to not walk away so quickly when told no. Certainly there were instances in my career where I was told no and I had to accept it. But I think I learned pretty early on that it was going to be, it was potentially going to be battles along the way where, my male counterpart didn't have to go through that. It was a lot easier not to be, chauvinist, but it was certainly a reality. So I think that helped me set my course pretty early on.
Right. Dan, how about you? Aha moment?
Yeah, I mean, I loved what Pam just said. I mean, willing to stand up for yourself,
Yeah.
metrics and chutzpah. I mean, I can echo that. If I think all the way back, I've been really lucky in a lot of ways. My earliest mentors were men that were committed to help women rise up. And this has been true for me all through my career, up until me being a venture capitalist, which no one would ever have predicted. That, I've been very lucky to always have a direct manager or in a line of men that were like, no, she's good. We're going to listen, she's good. Now, the reason for that goes to what Pam just said, which is, I am sure every one of us will tell you that we over-deliver. It's not fair. It has nothing to do with fair. We bust our tails to over-deliver. And my first job was in sales. So over-delivering was actually easy because the metrics are so clear. You make your number, you don't make your number. I mean, it's a lot harder if you're in engineering or marketing or whatever. I mean, I moved into marketing years later. So I made my number. I blew my number away. I was a great salesman. And when you combined the fact that you made the metrics, you were willing to ask and stand up, you had the chutzpah, but you had, and it was men who basically would say, I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to take you to that next step. And then there'd be somebody at that next step who said, I'm going to take you to the next step. And, if I look through a very long career, yes, there have been some women who have helped me tremendously. But in all honesty, it's been a majority have been men who have basically said, you're good, you deserve to be heard. I've asked for the raise, I've asked for the promotion, you have to ask. Because if you think that you deserve it and someone's going to just basically say, oh, you did great, let's give it to you, you're fooling yourself. So you got to stand up, you got to ask, you got to over deliver. But, the reality is, then there need to be people in your path that are going to basically help mentor and coach you and take you and believe in you and take to that next step. And once I figured that out very early on, that's a formula you can replicate. And by the way, I've had bosses who are jerks. I've had folks directly above me who literally were a problem. And you got to take that into your own hands as well. So it's not that it's all like, oh, every step is really worked out. It hasn't. Mm-hmm. When you have the obstacle in front of you, then it's the same thing. You got to take it into your own hands. You got to stand up. You got to find a way around it. You got to make it happen. Because if you think someone's going to fix it for you, that's not the case.
Love it. I feel the same way. I've had some wonderful men in my career mentor me through some very tough times. And I've had terrible women leaders that I've worked for and have found, that I've gotten much better coaching and development through men mentors. And so totally agree. Thank you, Diane. Let's talk about kind of some tactical stuff. What's the most impactful thing you do day to day to combat your lack of confidence where you feel it, right? When you're hit up against that lack of confidence, you're like, oh, I don't know. What do you do? What do you do right now today when you hit those moments? Because we all have them. So help the folks in the audience learn a couple tips or tricks. Robin?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm actually going to go reference back to the TechCrunch Disrupt example that you gave at the very beginning. So it was a study that was done by Columbia University that basically where they had researchers that sat and basically observed all the questions that the investor panel, judging panel asked of the entrepreneurs on stage, and they cataloged all these things. And all of the facts that Heather outlined earlier were right in terms of just the difference in funding for female entrepreneurs versus male entrepreneurs, and the questions that were asked of male entrepreneurs versus female entrepreneurs. But what she didn't mention, and what I think is actually really compelling here, is that there is a silver lining to that, and it did play out in the data. And I think it's really important for people to take this and think about it and read that study. The Harvard Business Review wrote an article about it, and then the study was published by Columbia University. This was back in, I think, 2010 timeframe, just so people can go and find it and reference it. But what it boiled down to is that there were these two basic categories of questions. One was a promotion-focused question. The other was a prevention-focused question. And they're kind of like two sides of the same coin. So let me give you a couple of examples. So a promotion-focused question might be, how do you plan to monetize this and take it to market? And a prevention-oriented question was, how long is it going to be till you break even? Right? So you can see how they're kind of like different spins on getting at sort of the same information from that investor or from that entrepreneur. What the researchers found is that those entrepreneurs that were skilled at taking a prevention-focused question, basically a sort of detracting type question, and spinning it with a promotion-oriented answer, actually got way more funding. And when I say way more funding, we're talking about $7 to $8 million versus about $500,000 when they looked at that. And so one of the things that I think is really important is to actually pause, think about the question, and think, is there a way that I can spin this that is oriented around the positivity? Now, what I wouldn't say, because I can see Diane's going, but you got to answer the question. You do answer the question. So for example, how long till you break even? You can say, we're going to break even in 12 months, but here are all the things that we're going to do in terms of monetization that actually might accelerate that path. Or, right, so you can start to talk about the things that start making them think about what a great, huge opportunity it is versus how you're going to insulate yourself from the potential risk. Because obviously the risk is there for everybody, whether you're a male entrepreneur, a female entrepreneur, an experienced entrepreneur, an inexperienced entrepreneur. The risk is always there. The venture capitalist and the angel investor's job is to identify that risk and determine whether or not they're willing to take it on alongside you. And so your job as the person trying to sell yourself and sell your company is to try to sway them at thinking, you know what, this risk is worth taking. And so I guess that nugget that I would leave you with from that is that it's okay when somebody asks a question of you to take a deep breath, think about the answer, and spin it so that you're giving them a promotion-oriented answer. And I would highly, highly recommend that everybody go find that article and read it. And study it and think about the questions that you're going to get, because it's not easy to do on the fly. You have to practice this. But it made an extraordinary difference for the entrepreneurs that actually did it in terms of their funding outcomes.
That's great. Thanks, Robin. Pam, how about you?
Well, I think, Robin just mentioned the idea of practicing. So I think that, many of us have a pitch, that we know what we're going to be, what we're selling and what we have to offer. But I think that having somebody that maybe is a good sounding board, that will be an aggressive critiquer of what you're selling is a good way to think about how you refine your story and how you're delivering it. So you want to potentially find a mentor who has experience either having raised funds or is investing in women companies and preferably a man. That you can have really aggressively critique what you're selling and be brutally honest with whether you are successfully communicating that this is a big vision and that you'll do whatever it takes to get it done. You don't want someone that's just going to, be nice about, oh, you've got a nice pitch here, but rather break it down for you and help you think about ways to deliver it in a way that is going to be received as you would like it to be.
We
That's
should
great.
plug
That's a
Pitch
good plug.
Clubs.
Yeah, I was just plugging the Pitch Club. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, we do a TiE Pitch Club every couple months. I think our next one is in May, and both Robin and I sort of moderate and provide feedback. It's a good way to get rapid feedback and improve, and you can come multiple times with your pitch, and we give you feedback. But really, really great feedback, Pam. Thank you for that. And then Darty.
Yes, I actually, that's absolutely accurate and very insightful. I think the Pitch Club idea is so good for entrepreneurs starting up. But, it's also a little further in the sense that when you're doing something really that has never been done before, let's say you're going to change the world, right? I think it's okay to say, there are certain elements that I'm, not familiar with or I need help with, and kind of keep company of advisors that have done that and that can help you in the process. And it's okay to ask for help. And I think a lot of times women struggle with that a lot, that, I don't want to admit that, I can't do this, or I don't want to talk, especially in front of potential investors, because I know I've made this work with 100 people. And so I've, kind of given a product that's working. I've done my POC or POV. And now I can really make this work. But they've, a few basic things like, your customer acquisition costs, or, homework as to when you're scaling, what you're going to do with that. A lot of entrepreneurs will say, I don't have a CAC. Well, all of us have a CAC, right? It doesn't matter if it was 100 customers that you wanted to, bring in your fold, or 1,000 or 10,000. But I think, assessing that really closely is important, because ties into the whole monetization and how you're going to make money for your investor. Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what everybody's looking for, right? You want to invest in companies that are investment worthy, right?
Great, thank you, Darty. And Diane.
I agree with everything everyone said. I think the only thing I would add is don't go in the room alone. A lot of what an investor is looking at is who are the people that you surround yourself with. And there's no way you can have all the answers. In fact, and many of you have heard me say this before. I mean, if I sit down with an entrepreneur and they start out with I have the answer, I know this, I've done this, I can solve that, you may be the rock science, just the scientist of the universe. The reality is you're not going to get my money. This is a team effort. And probably the most valuable thing that we want to see, in addition to a great idea, a great product in an interesting market, is the people, because the way to the money is through the people. And so therefore you shouldn't go into the room alone. You should have the team, and therefore you don't have to have all the answers. You have whether it's your finance guy or your product guy or your marketing guy, whoever it is, whoever your co-founder is. This is a team effort. And so you put yourself at higher risk just for all the reasons that have been discussed here, because you're going to get tripped up, right? So in addition to listening, pausing, answering carefully, being clear on what you know and don't know, you don't need to know it all. Go in with the folks that you're going to surround yourself with. Go in with the folks that when you ask for money, this is my team. These are the people who are going to build this business. They've got the answers. Together, we make the collective strength. That's going to help you a lot.
Great, thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
I think that sometimes I'll talk to entrepreneurs and they may not have enough money yet to have staffed all these positions. So to Diane's point, exactly, you may have them on board, or they may be consulting or providing a couple hours a week or whatever it is. It's okay to bring them in and explain that once you get the funding, they will be on board full time.
Yeah,
and in particular, when it comes to whoever's heading up technology, because it's going to be really hard to get funding if you don't have and don't own that technology. You've got to be able to demonstrate very quickly that you've got someone that's going to come on board to play that role, because that's really what they're going to look for. They want to know that you're going to have that talent. You know, all you need is the funding and you will have your team.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Great ad. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll open it up to the audience. And this one could potentially turn into another panel discussion, but I'm pretty curious about what are the 3 things, or let's say 2 things. What are the 2 things that every founder should know walking into the pitch room? So if you had to prioritize where you better know your shit, excuse my language, what are the 2 or 3 things that you better not go without knowing? And let's start with you, Diane. I know how you love me picking on you first.
I don't know if this is 2 or 5. What problem are you trying to solve? How are you going to solve it? And specifically, and again, that may be a vision, that may be a reality, but how you plan to solve it? How is that differentiated from what's in the market right now? How big is that problem? So is it a big problem? Is it an important problem in a big market? How are you going to differentiate yourself? And then, and again, depending on where you are in your journey here, raising money is metrics driven. So whether you're raising your first 500K or you're raising your third 25 million, the question's going to be, with the use of funds, what are the next set of metrics I'm going to solve, right?
Can I interrupt you, Diane? Because I think that's a really important point that first-time entrepreneurs get wrong all the time. Because the question comes as, what are your use of funds? And almost always, the first-time entrepreneur answers it, this is what I'm going to spend that money on. Right. And what Diane just said is really important. She doesn't care how you're spending the money. She cares about the impact that you're going to make with the money that she's investing. So this is an opportunity for you to spin. This is an opportunity for you to say, these are all of the milestones that I expect to be able to achieve when your money is gone and we're ready to raise the next round of financing.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry for interrupting, but
No,
I hear it
absolutely,
so often.
Absolutely. And just, I assume you can still hear and see me because the Zoom portion of the slide.
You're here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, it is very step by step, delivery by delivery, because what everyone's going to say is there's really only one place for you to spend the money in the early days. It's on people, right? You're going to spend a little bit maybe on rent, and you're going to spend a little bit on, but there is no marketing. You don't have a product. I mean, it's on people. So yeah, you're going to sit and say, I'm going to hire 3 engineers and the question is, what metric are you going to solve between now and the 500K running out, or the 5 million running out, or the 25 million running out, right? But first you got to tell me what problem are you solving? How are you going to solve it? Convince me it's a big problem, right? So that I understand you're a smart person, you've done your homework, you know what the hell, why you're sitting here. And I don't care whether it's that you're making soap or you're doing a customer database. I don't care, right? Why do you think this is going to be a big enough company for me to write a check? And then what are the metrics that basically we're going to measure against in terms of the funding that you get?
Yeah, and I would argue too, that's not just for VCs. So any of you looking for money from SBA or other funding sources, you need to know what problem you're solving, how big that problem is. They need to know the return on that investment. So really great advice. Pam, how about you? What would you say the 2 or 3 things are?
Diane really covered the critical elements that you need to be able to address. I think that it's being able to do that, be passionate about what you're selling, but don't fall too in love with the idea that you're missing the critical metrics that Diane just mentioned. I also think as another layer, probably not as important as the ones that, Diane mentioned, which are fundamental, is really being able to dimensionalize who the customer is. Mm-hmm. So being able to really, drill down with you know, being able to create that picture so that, again, you're gaining that additional credibility that you really not only understand what how big the opportunity is and how you're going to differentiate yourself and be able to, you know, be able to address those key metrics, but then also show how who the customers are and how you're going to reach them.
Great. Darty, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just I guess I'm a perennial marketing person, so I love to ask, you know, who else is doing this? Because a lot of times, you know, we find that we're in this cocoon, and you know, we've got the metrics, we've got, you know, the monetization bit as well, but we haven't checked out the competition. And we've forgotten to see that someone else is, and a lot of times it's also the, you know, the smaller businesses that start and they do really well in a certain geographic area, and they actually have something similar in another city, leave alone another country. So I think it's good to have a very clear idea of your competition. Does it exist? And we'd all love to say I'm changing the world, and you know, my idea is very unique. But it's, you know, good to keep that kind of in, you know, in check and research. And, you know, I'm sure it's out there. And if it's not, it's wonderful. But then also look at an addressable market, right? People do tend to say, you know, well, the, you know, billion people, you know, here are my potential market. Maybe they're not, right? So having those specific metrics are very important as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Robin, anything more to add beyond what you said
Yeah,
earlier?
I do. Just one comment on what Darty said. If you think there's no competition, you're wrong. Period. You're wrong. The competition might be if you were Microsoft Word. What was the competition for that before? It was a typewriter. It was pen and paper. There is always an alternative. If there is a problem, somebody's already solved it. They may not be solving it in such a slick, sexy way as you are, but you cannot say there's no competition. That is probably the best way to get a VC to roll their eyes back in their head and stop listening to you. So don't ever say that. I think that there are a couple of other things that every investor, and certainly, you know, in my time at Motorola Ventures, when I was making investments for them and looking at angel investors, there's a couple of things that I'm very interested in learning about. One is, what validation do you have that the market wants what you're selling? I want evidence that you've got some degree of traction. And for really, really early stage, concept stage companies, this is hard to come by because nobody's writing you checks yet because you probably don't even have the product yet. But that does not give you an excuse for not answering that question. You have to be able to answer that question. You have to have done interviews or surveys or have domain expertise in that arena where you personally have had to solve that problem and all of your colleagues have had to solve that problem. You have to have some sort of evidence that the market wants what you're selling. So that's number one, market validation and evidence thereof. The second one is, I hate to make it about dollars and cents, but it's really kind of about who's going to buy you at the end of the day. So one of the things that VCs often do is they kind of work backward from your exit, right? And this day and age, the vast majority of investors don't ever assume that you're going to IPO. They assume that if you're going to have a successful outcome, that you're going to have a successful outcome through acquisition. So you need to basically kind of lead them by the nose to who's going to buy you. And what's important to them is that the likely acquirers of your company buy companies at the stage that you think you're going to get sold, and that they pay a large revenue multiple to acquire them. So it's much better, for example, to get acquired by a Google or an IBM or a Microsoft than it is to get acquired by, say, another startup company that isn't particularly well funded. Yeah, you can put the acquisition checkbox next to that company on your resume, but it doesn't make the investor a lot of money. And so part of the mental math that we're doing as investors is working backward from what that exit is going to be. And your job is to paint a picture that is viable, that is believable by the investor, that you're going to be acquired by somebody that will pay top dollar to buy you if you hit your metrics and you're successful.
Thank you. So one thing I want to add to, TiE has a really great, couple really great programs. We have a Young Entrepreneurs Program, which is a school program, and we also have the TiE Excel Bootcamp for folks that want to learn more about. We basically take you through what it takes to build a pitch, all the way from thinking about product market fit, how to market yourself, how to build financials. And so I encourage you, if you're interested in some of the things that these folks have talked about, we do cover a lot of it in the TiE Excel Bootcamp. So take a look at that. So I wanted to open it up to questions from the audience. Why don't we use the Q&A? There should be a Q&A button on your control in the webinar for Zoom. And if you'd like to...
It'll actually be in the chat box. Oh, it's that, sorry, Carrie, we can't hear you, but it's the chat button. So if you look in the bottom center of your screen, there's a little chat icon, click that. And then if you just type in it, we'll see the questions on our end.
Well, okay. There's also a Q&A, but
oh, there is?
Yeah.
I don't see it.
So sure, let's put it in the chat. That's great.
While we're waiting for questions to come in, there's one other thing that I think is that I just didn't want to leave the conversation without saying, and it's back to some of the points that we heard earlier about, and I can't remember who said it. I think it was Diane, that there are people that really just fundamentally believe that it is not fair that they are encountering bias, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the investment arena, etc. And yeah, it sucks. It's not fair. However, this is a generation or two's worth of work that we are doing here. The women that are on this call with me, we are all doing that work right now. We are doing that work by providing you this information. We're doing that work. Sorry?
We've been doing the work for 12
Yeah, we've been doing the work for a long damn time. But we're doing the work right this moment also. But I guess my point is, the only way that we are actually going to get to the point where there is a level playing field is to elevate more women into positions of power. It is to create more wealth for female entrepreneurs and to then create female angel investors that then might become, set up their own funds and become venture investors. The way we're going to get there is by making the change at a grassroots level. And it is something that, it's an unfortunate thing, but I think in order to succeed, we have to also admit that this is the reality. We need to toughen our skin up. We need to, when it's appropriate, point out those biases. When it's not appropriate, play the man's game. But in order to get there and to make that change, we need more women that end up in positions of power and more women that hold their own wealth. And so I get it. I think it's unfair. It pisses me off. I talk about that when I'm at home. I talk about that when I'm in the boardroom at my company where I am the CEO, but I do not bring that attitude into an investor meeting because it'll just shoot you in the foot. So I thought that was an important point to make. It looks like we have all kinds of great questions coming in now. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Heather.
Thanks, Robin. I am looking through some questions. So question for Pam, how would you recommend doing an A/B test before launching our site?
I think it depends on what the site is and what the audience looks like. And if you can find a way to reach that audience, to be able to, do that before you launch is great. I also think once you've launched, you can find ways to, if you have the resources, if you're going to, build out the two different, elements to the sites that you want to test, you can do that in real time. But I think, again, it depends on what the site is and what you're trying to accomplish and who the audience is.
Great, thank you. I'm going to actually try to pick some of these that are very on point for sort of building confidence and so here's one. Should women founders highlight the benefits of having female team workforce while pitching? Shall it lead to a positive impression? So changing that perception. Who would like to answer that?
No.
Robin, do you have a thought? Oh. Who's
no.
Diane? No.
No.
Okay, say more.
Well, I said, you got to take gender off the table while you're still a woman. I mean, they know you're a woman. If you walk in the room and say, hi, I'm a woman, I mean, that's just stupid. So they know you're a woman. I mean, and there's a time and a place, when you go in, you don't walk in, do a pitch and get money. There is a relationship that gets built. It can take months. I mean, on average, I look at companies for 12 months before I ever write a check. And at a minimum, it's 3 months. And that is more meetings than you could even possibly imagine. So there's a time and a place to, example, I am on the board of a company up in Seattle that the CEO, who's a man, has a very strong bias towards leadership and building out female leadership in his team. There is no question this is part of the culture that he's trying to build, and it's no question that it was part of what he wanted to ensure that the investors that invested in him shared that passion, that vision. But we didn't invest in him because of that. We invested in him because of the idea, the market, the technology, et cetera, and the quality of his team. Now, the fact that his majority of his team were women ultimately in the 4th, 5th, 6th meeting came out because he started talking about the culture that he wanted to drive and, all of his attitudes towards that. You don't have to tell someone you're a woman. They know it. So as I said, you got to take gender off the table while still being a woman and being yourself. So no, you don't go in there and say, hi, I'm a woman and therefore I'm different.
Does anyone want to add anything to that?
I agree with Diane. I think it's, not about special treatment. It's about representation, right? About knowing what you're bringing. It's your idea, it's your passion, it's, your product. And I think, that really is something that one has to walk into a room with. It's really nothing more than that. And on both sides, I think we women as women investors, when we're looking at other women entrepreneurs, I think that switch, if we can find it, is really critical to switch it off and just look at it as an investable idea or a company versus male female.
Great. Here's another good question here. What is your go-to mantra after being rejected? I'm in the beginning of fundraising and want to create the right rejection mentality as well as a winning mentality.
The public, what we publicly say or what?
Who would like to answer that first? Robin, you want to take a shot at that?
I can take a stab at it. So the first startup that I was a co-founder of back in 1995. No, it was later than that. Sorry, it was in the early 2000s. We pitched 49 times and got 49 no's before we finally got a yes. I mean, so number one, you just have to go into this knowing that it could be an extraordinarily long haul and that you are going to get a lot of no's.
Which has nothing to do with being a woman.
Yeah, it had nothing to do. I mean, that my co-founders were men. And I wasn't the CEO. I did quite a lot of the pitching because of the dynamic on that particular team. But it really wasn't because I was a woman, because my 2 co-founders were both men. So the first thing is just know that that's what you're up against. And that's what most first-time entrepreneurs are up against, is that you're just going to have to cast a very wide net to be able to try to find somebody that bites. You might get lucky, and that's awesome that you found the right investor for you at the right time. But I think what I learned coming out of that is that there is a lot to learn for understanding why you got the no. And what we would always do is ask, what were the things that gave you concern about this investment opportunity? And sometimes the answer you would get was, that's too close. It's too close to some other portfolio company that we have. Okay, well, great. That wasn't the right investor. We probably should have done our homework and looked at what their portfolio was and not gone there in the first place. But other times it had to do with a lack of confidence in our business model being viable, or that we didn't have a great value proposition that was super clear, or they didn't really understand. Like sometimes it was that they didn't understand what our value proposition was in the first place. Back to Diane's original point of like, know what you're doing. Beyond just knowing what you're doing and what problem you're solving and having conviction about it, you also need to be able to actually state it very clearly so someone else can understand it. Because it might make a lot of sense in your head, but not when the words come jumbling out of your mouth. So what we did, I mean, I probably did that deck for that company 40 different times. I changed it and tweaked it here and there based on the feedback that we got. Sometimes we got conflicting feedback and we had to make decisions. But I guess the mantra that I came out of is we can learn something from this. We can learn something from this rejection. I just need to lean in and ask the question about why they rejected us.
Yeah, I love that, Robin. You know, I had the same experience with many no's before yes. And I think in this whole concept of developing your confidence, man, the no's were so invaluable in helping build my confidence in pitching the next time, because I could anticipate what potential rejections were coming or objections, right? And so just in this whole thought process, don't be afraid of the no's, right? Persevere, learn from them, and have that be a build on your confidence, because now you're getting the hang of it, right? Because you're not going to get funding in your first couple rounds or your first couple discussions. So
right, let's be clear. No's are hard, right?
Yes.
I mean, you keep hearing no's are hard. I mean,
Yeah.
and by the way, the VCs have to go raise money as well. I mean, we just raised $100 million. It took almost 2 years. You know, the no's, you just want to sit and say, what the hell is your problem? Why didn't you, you know? And yeah, so sometimes it's like it was the wrong person. We didn't do a good job. He didn't get it. It was the wrong timing. Yeah, all of that. And then there's the, what the hell just happened? This guy, you know, it just, the no's are hard. But so what you got to do is, it's not, yes, it's a learning experience, but you got to have a hard shell. You just got to go, okay, that was another no, let's move on. Because if you try to interpret all of it and learn something from all of them, you're going to really make yourself crazy.
Well, and another spin on that is, and it's certainly hard to do, is to not take it personally.
You can't take it personally.
You can't. I mean, it's easy to say, and I think that's one of the things, it's naturally in our DNA.
Yep.
We want to be liked.
Yeah.
Where a lot of guys will just say, screw it, I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care if I'm liked as long as I get the money.
Exactly.
So I think that it's hard to not take it personally, but you can't.
You can't take it personally, and you just got to keep on moving.
That's great.
To Robin's point, I think it's important to match the potential investor, understand a little more about, you know, where they've been investing in the past, you know, and it's okay to ask questions to investors. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, you're time bound, right? You're pitching under a lot of pressure. You may not be able to cover all the facts. If you're in a competition, for example, you know, you've got 5 minutes to pitch or 10 minutes to pitch. It's not enough time. Ask for some, you know, separate time. I mean, if it's a direct with the investor, it's always good to have a, you know, deeper dive and, you know, spend some time understanding what's on the table.
Yeah, and we actually have a question about that too. I'll ask that. Should we pursue funds from organizations that share the passion for the issue that our company is working to solve, or should we try to reach out to dispassionate investors who have no interest in the issue we're working on? Who would like to answer that?
Dispassionate investors. I love that. They're just about the money, man.
Whoever will take your meeting.
No, but that's a very valid question. I think that's something that does, you know, come up a lot. What kind of an investor do I need? Right? I mean, I've gone through that on my side when I was bootstrapping, and then as an investor also, you know, I do think that that alignment is important in a way. Yes, it is all about money, then it's great, and that's, you know, it's a clear communication. But what kind of investor you want it's a great question to ask.
Yeah, I often look at you know, the investors as what kind of value can they add us beyond the dollars, right? Are there people that can bring connections, that can bring advice in areas that we may be less skilled at? So I look at investors as part of the team. Are there people that will be really helpful in pursuing the goals of the business. But Diane, did you want to talk to that?
Yeah. So, you know, we don't have it really up in the Pacific Northwest, but it's widely held down in the Bay Area, spray and pray. So there are investors, it's called spray and pray. It basically is, we're going to go give, forget the numbers, doesn't matter. We're going to go give $1 million to 100 companies. And statistically, we're going to get a hit by, now in today's world, none of us know where we're going to get a hit, but we're going to get a hit statistically out of those 100. The spray and pray folks usually do it by thematic approach. So they're either doing it by vertical market, they're doing it by technological, niche. You know, we're going to do all AI, we're going to do all video, we're going to do all, or we're going to do all fintech, we're going to do all media, whatever. So the spray and pray folks do it thematically, but they're less about relationship and more about statistical averaging of hit rate. That's those folks, and those are very different investors, and those are usually very quick decision makings. They don't, because of the nature of the way they invest, they can't afford to spend a lot of time. They usually don't take board seats. Very rarely do they take board seats. That means that you don't get a lot of time for them. To the point of smart money, it's not smart money. I mean, they may have a little bit of network effect, but for the most part, they're playing a statistical averaging game in a specific thematic area. Then you've got the rest of us. And the rest of us, it's a relationship, right? I mean, especially as an early stage investor, I'm on average going to marry you for at least 7 years. And it may be 10 years or more. And we're going to get to know each other a long, long time. And I'm going to keep putting money into you over that period of time. And I'm going to get to know you and your team and your family and everybody else. And so you better like that relationship going in, because if you don't like it going in, if it's not working going in, it sure as hell isn't going to get any better later on, because building a business is really hard. And so, you know, you do have to do your homework. A dispassionate investor in all likelihood is either going to be spray and pray, or it's going to be somebody who isn't going to provide you the smart money and network effect. And at the end, and therefore it could be a mistake, because you could find that you and that investor end up on very opposite ends of the table in terms of the expectation of what they think they want and what you think you want. So to the question, you know, you need to do your homework. You need to find someone you want to not only take their money from, but work with, learn from, has a smart network, and that basically you can sit at a table with and have a hard conversation over many, many, many years to get to hopefully an agreed upon outcome.
That's right.
I would just add to that I think one thing that's really important is to actually look at the biography of the individual investor or investor team that is taking a look at you. And oftentimes what Diane's describing is the spray and pray, which I haven't actually heard that terminology, but it's perfect. That those investors tend to actually not necessarily have a lot of operating experience. They haven't sat in your shoes. It is really important, particularly at an early stage, that your early investors have walked a mile in shoes that are similar to yours, because what you'll do is you'll learn a lot from the mistakes that they made. They will help you avoid wasting money. They will help prevent you from making bad hires. You know, all the things that are the mistakes that I've made multiple times in my career, and hopefully I've learned from them and I don't make them again. Like, probably the biggest thing that I do for people that I mentor is go, don't do what I do. Don't do what I did. And so if you got somebody who's, you know, fresh out of, you know, business school, that is a principal at a venture fund, what value do they really have to add? If you've got somebody who's been working for an investment bank and then made the jump from an investment bank into an earlier mid-tier investment firm, what value do they have to add for you? I mean, it's really important to actually understand who it is that you are talking to. Because some of those people can be extraordinarily problematic if they end up on your board. Because if they don't really understand the challenges that you're up against, and they just are all about making the dollars and cents, and they're on your board, like Diane said, you will end up on opposite ends of that table, and you're stuck with each other. Yeah. It can get really contentious.
Love it. I've even had that experience, so that hits home. It's not fun. Let's see, we've got a question. What are the particular areas that you would like to see addressed in a market validation process? So why don't I start with Diane, and then we'll go through.
You know, I think we've answered a lot of this already. Number one, a definition of what that market is. Number two, the TAM, how large is the market? What portion of that, where are the beachheads that you're going to start in? I mean, you don't take on a market all at once, especially with early money. You're going to basically address what the beachheads are that you're going to address to get into that market, to get a niche into that market, to prove it out, to get through your early product issues, etc. So, the problem, the size of the problem, your product, what is the product? Obviously, it may not be built, or maybe it's further along, but what is it? How does it solve it? How do you differentiate from others in the marketplace? And then, the reality is, and again, this is all dependent on where you are in the fundraising. Is this your first 500 or your first 5 million or whatever? At the end of the day, build it and they will come is a very bad strategy. So, basically what you're really going to get into, whether it's in, again, the initial discussions or later on, is the go-to-market strategy for how are you going to extract dollars from wallets, and who's the economic buyer you're going to extract it from. From the very start, you've got to have thought through some of this. And obviously it gets more mature, it gets more knowledgeable, you get more confident in terms of some of the answers. But you've got to basically build this out so that it's not just a matter of, I have a great idea, give me money. You've got to know why someone's going to care to give you money. And from my standpoint, personally, when I go into early discussions with companies, I'm not even concerned as much with, are you right or are you wrong? I'm really as interested or more interested for what is the thought process that you've gone through to get to where you are right now. How have you analyzed this? We may disagree. I may challenge you on some of what your assumptions are. I want to see how you're processing information. How are you processing the opportunity? How are you analyzing why you believe the pricing should be $1 versus $100 versus it's the whatever title versus different title? I'm looking at how you're looking at building a company. We can figure out how to get there. And in fact, I can tell you there's not a single solitary company I've ever put money in where ultimately what we invested in terms of the plan is where it actually started. We got there together, right? It was an iterative process of questions and answers and diving in and doing more work. And so this is a matter early on to you having a full picture, but how have you analyzed that?
Great. Anyone want to add anything to that? So a follow-on question to that was, what if there isn't any market information because this product is new? How do you get that market validation and present it?
Take that, Robin.
Yeah. So number one, if there's not actually, you can't say that there's never market information. Back to the same topic of there's never any, you don't have any competition. You're wrong. There isn't any market information. You're wrong. If this problem is a true problem, there is somebody somewhere solving it. Even if they're solving it with duct tape and chewing gum, they're solving the problem. So there is going to be information about the size of the duct tape market and the chewing gum market, right? So first of all, you can find that information. You just need to expand how you're thinking about it beyond the category that you have placed yourself into mentally. I think that's step number one, is just thinking about, like, how are people solving this problem today? So that also acts as market validation for you. If you can point to, this problem, people are solving this problem and they're doing it in this highly manual fashion, and it's taking them, 6 hours a day, and our solution can do the same thing that they're doing manually today in 15 seconds. There is a return on investment calculation that you can present right there to your potential investor. So that's number one. The second thing is actually going out and interviewing prospective customers. If you are locked in an office, slaving away, building a product, and you are not out talking to prospective customers about what you're doing, you're failing. Period. You're failing. You need to be out making sure that at every step of the way, you are validating that the thing that you're building is the thing that the market's going to want. And you may not always get the answer that you think you're going to get, but wouldn't you damn well better have that information right now than 6 months from now, when you spent all this time engineering the product and you're getting ready for launch and then it falls flat on its face? I think you would, and I guarantee your investors would rather that you know it. So even if you have nothing to show them other than drawings on a piece of paper when you go and sit down with these people at coffee, do it. Because you will learn invaluable things, and you will gather snippets of data and quotes and willingness to pay, and, hey, would you be willing to pay $10 a month for this thing? If you can get that kind of information, even if it's anecdotal, and then spin that and convey that to Pam or to Diane when you're pitching them, they're going to go, wow, they've done their homework. Maybe they're not totally right, but I'm thinking about this, and I'm going to lean in, and I'm going to ask some people that I know that have that problem, whether or not this is valuable to them, right? But if you just say, well, we don't have any competition, we don't really know, the product doesn't exist, so we don't know what people are going to be willing to pay for it, you're dead in the water. So get creative about how you get validation for what you're doing. And validation, obviously, if somebody's writing you a check, that's like the finest form of validation. And that's ultimately what the venture capitalists and angel investors care about. But there is a way to be validated far earlier in the process than that. And that's what you need to be focusing on.
Pam, Darty, did you want to add?
Yeah, sure. One of my favorite topics. So, it's that classic, get 10 people excited about your product, right? Even if it's behavior modification or it's something never been seen before. And, the classic example of Snapchat, right? They did a test in high school and got a bunch of high school kids excited about it. And, and they tried different audiences, different beta groups, and you get 10 people excited about something, you're addressing something that no one had thought of. And it is a need that we'd love to have, whether it's a convenience, it's a, brand new app, even if it's a business to business product. If it is behavior modification, go out there and try it on, one client. Sometimes it's okay to even say, don't pay us for this, but we want to see whether it works or not. And you hook them to the product, and that's your big validation.
Mm-hmm. Pam?
I think that the idea has been captured. I mean, I think that you can't even begin to think about going in to ask for money if you can't answer those questions. And again, find creative ways, as Robin said, to dimensionalize it. Be able to, in some cases, if you have some sector experience in what you're designing, that you have some validation there, that you come from an industry that, was trying to solve a problem and now you've got a different way of solving it. You can refer back to maybe some of those metrics, but you have to have those answers or else you're going to be dead in the water, as Robin said.
Great. We'll do one or two more questions here. Beyond the pitch deck, what do you look for and what appeals to you in terms of the team? So Pam, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, as I was just mentioning, certainly if you've got some sector experience, that's always, valuable. I also think that if you have had some other successful exits or been part of a team that has had a successful exit, that there's credibility there. I also think it's, looking at the founders and, what their skill set is and how they're complementing one another. Do you have the kind of the foundational business areas that are really going to help you at depending on what stage you're in to really drive it. So I don't expect you to come in if it's just an idea right now with the salesperson. You've got to think about, how you designing the product. Do you have the technical expertise that can help actually execute on that? So I think it's depending on the stage, it's really looking at some of those things.
Great. Anyone want to add? Diane?
I agree with everything Pam said. I think at the end of the day, we watch the dynamics in a team. Is it well balanced? Do they listen to each other? Do they let each other speak? You have to have a healthy ego in order to build a company, but is your ego in check? Does everyone listen? Again, it is all about the people at the end of the day. So it's a matter of just having enough time to watch that team, to get to know that team, and to see how they do together.
Great.
I would just add that if you are in the technology world or if you're in the med tech world, I think having a co-founder on the team that is a hands-on technologist, even if you're giving them a C-level title, is going to be extraordinarily important at the early stages. And the reason for that is that there is very likely going to be a period of time in which all of you are working in a sweat equity position, meaning that you cannot pay yourselves, and yet product needs to be built. And that can happen prior to going and pitching and getting your first round of financing, but it has also happened, at least to me and probably other people on this panel, where you go through a period of time where you go, wow, we don't have the money to get to that milestone that I promised Diane that I need to get to before I can raise that next round of financing. So we have to figure out how to cut our salaries back and do sweat equity. So in that early stage of a company, if your business is reliant on somebody writing a piece of software or building a piece of hardware, somebody on that team needs to have some of the experience to be able to carry you in a period of time where you can't afford to hire people or can't afford to contract out.
Mm-hmm.
I think also very early on, sometimes, founders make this mistake as well. They're looking for a co-founder and they start distributing so much equity up front because at that point they don't have money to give. So it's all about, giving out equity and realizing later on that maybe that was too generous, and maybe that was not the right thing to do, especially when you're raising money. And investors are going to look at, who's holding what equity and, what is their contribution. So I think that's a, very critical decision as well that a lot of founders have to make early on.
Yeah, one last question, given that we're running out of time, and I think it's a follow-on to what we just talked about, is as far as finding co-founders goes, what qualities do you look for, and how do you ensure that you have compatibility before signing on the dotted line? Who would like to go first?
I can talk about mistakes I've made. So
Great.
I have on a few occasions gone into a co-founding relationship with somebody where I was impressed by the idea. I'm the execution person. I am not the idea person. Like on any team, I'm the one that figures out how to take my co-founder's vision and figure out how to execute. So just to put that out there, I have on a couple of occasions become extraordinarily enamored with someone's vision and agreed to become a co-founder of that company or join, at a very early stage in sort of a C-level or VP level position. And pretty much I could say without fail, I have to go back and check the memory banks, but pretty much without fail, that has been extraordinarily challenging. It has led to really, really difficult co-founder relationships. And it's because, frankly, we just didn't have a relationship prior to trying to start a company with one another. And so the first thing I would do is think about people that you have worked with in the past. Think about your colleagues, think about people that you've worked with at partner companies where you just have evidence of what that work style is like, and whether or not they are the kind of person that talks a great game but doesn't execute, or is the person that gets so mired in the details that they can't pull their head up and go, wait, is this important work that I'm doing right now, or am I just busy, right? Those kinds of things can really, really trip you up if you don't understand their work style. And if that work style is incompatible with you. And so, I would be really hesitant to advise that somebody goes out and just finds a co-founder kind of through networking events and those kinds of things, and instead really thinks about, who do I have in my network that I actually know? And if that doesn't work, then start, then ask about these people. Like do your version of background checks, find out who they've worked before, reference check them, and they should reference check you too. And maybe you walk before you run, and you work on a project together, and you agree to not found the company for a period of time and work on something together before you've actually like written it in ink and become a C Corp and distribute equity. Because once you're in, it's so hard to unwind. It is both a legal mess, it can become a financial mess, and it's also just extraordinarily emotionally charged. So unwinding it, if you made a bad decision about co-founders, is not worth taking your time getting into the relationship in the first place.
Anyone want to add anything else to that?
I think, yeah, definitely question, yourself as to what is that co-founder going to be doing. I think that's very critical. Sometimes women tend to look for men co-founders because they want that security, or they feel that they'll be better heard, or, better attended to. So I think that's important. Also, are you looking for a team or a co-founder? Because they're very different. Co-founder, founder vision has to be very well aligned. And, to Pam's point as well, it's a long-term relationship, and it's very important to ask those questions before going into that relationship. What exactly is that role that person going to fulfill?
Right. Any other thoughts? Well, thank you, everyone. I wanted to just take some of the highlights that I gathered from this discussion. Thank you, ladies, for such a wonderful bestowing of experience and just help. I just want to cover some of the highlights that I heard for the audience as they're sort of looking and trying to sort of capture what we talked about. First, I heard, you got to have a vision and be able to tell a big story, a big vision. You have to demonstrate hubris even if you're not feeling it, right? Ask even if you might get a no, and persevere. Don't stop at the first no, the second no, the 49th no. You've got the right idea. You've got a good, you've got the vision. Keep going. It's okay, and learn from every no that you get. Know your goal and your purpose for being in the room, right? And own it. Don't be afraid to lose your shit. That was probably, I think I'm going to quote that and put that on my my board. Willing to stand up and persevere through just times of feeling a little unsure, right? Just stand up and use your voice. Find a male mentor. I think I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's really helpful to hear their perspective, because when you do walk into a pitch room where there are multiple men and maybe one woman or no women, already having that feedback from a male mentor is actually really helpful. Over deliver where you can, right? And demonstrate your strength and your capabilities. And this one I love the most. Don't be a victim. Take the issue into your hands and make change. Don't just sit back, throw up your hands, and say this situation is crap. Actually take the issue into your hands and figure your way through it. Be resourceful, creative, and you'll get through it. Practice. So this is about the pitch, right? Practice in front of a mirror, in front of a male mentor, at the TiE Pitch Club. Take time to practice and so that you can own it when you walk into the room. Take on advisors that are smart folks in the functions that you may not be great at, right? And get that feedback. Find mentors and advisors. And again, I'm going to make another pitch for TiE, right? We've got a global network of charter members that are kick butt in many different fields and that are here to help you. And then lastly, bring the team. So demonstrate that you are not the only thinker in the room, that you are leveraging experts in their particular fields. And so the combination of that team of experts is stronger and demonstrates your ability to listen and defer to others on your team. Did I miss any one big highlight that that we should have folks walk away with?
I just wanted to reiterate that every question is an opportunity for you to spin the answer into a bigger, more promotion-oriented answer.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate your time. And what's on the screen now, just if you want to get involved, we've got some events coming up. But ladies, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and you know, keep kicking ass. And I am very grateful that you are in the TiE community, and we wish you all good luck. And if you have any questions about the TiE Women Program, you can see the URL on screen and the events coming up. But have a really great evening, and thank you for joining.
Carrie, before we go, Carrie, did you record this? Is the recording going to be available?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes. It's definitely
okay. Excellent. Good. Because I think there are probably a lot of people that will want to follow up with this after the fact as well.
Yep. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Diane.
Bye.
Robin. Stay healthy.
Stay healthy, everyone.
Yes.